To stay relevant in the marketplace, organizations have to divide the work into three categories: work that will be done by technology, work that will be done by humans, and the third category is work that will be done by humans with technology. My name is Abhijit Bhaduri, and this is exactly what I do for my clients. I help them figure out which of the pieces of work has the highest strategic value when you do it with technology, and what is the work that you could do with technology, but you don't want to do with technology. You're better off doing it with humans. So, talent and technology are the two factors that shape the world of work, and this is what the show is all about. So, let's get started. It is very hard to pursue your career. That's tough enough. And then there are people who pursue not one, but a completely different career. My guest today has done just that. Can you believe it? He was the CFO of a Fortune 500 firm and then decided to start his own firm in a completely different area. So, if you think that somebody was a CFO, you would imagine that they would do something to do with finance, right? You are wrong. So, let's get this person onto the screen. Anupam, what a delight to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Abhijit. It's indeed a pleasure and a privilege to be a part of your show.
Thank you. So, one of the things that really intrigued me was that you were a CFO. Now you run a super successful search firm. So, I'm going to talk to you about the transition as well as, how do you handle the search business? So, tell me about your career. I mean, were you always trained to be a finance person? Is that what you prepared for?
Yes, Abhijit. So I'm a chartered accountant by
Okay.
profession, and then I did my MBA, specialized in finance, and then I did my CPA as well. So yeah, out and out finance person. I started my career, my real job with a company called Carrier, which is the world's largest air conditioning company,
Hmm.
and in Singapore, where the regional headquarters were. And at that time, a number of countries in the Asia region were exploding with growth. Okay, there was rapid urbanization, so there was a lot of need for air conditioning. So we were growing 2x, 3x every year. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of the finance team that did all the numbers. And you could say that was my first introduction to leadership, because I was fortunate to work for bosses that really believed in developing leaders. So I was a finance person, but I was trained to understand the business side of things and how I should not be just a bean counter, but a solid business partner. And I think that is what the company believed in at that time. And that is how I was trained. I worked in Singapore, I worked in India, I did a short stint in the US as well. So I got global exposure and learned from people with different leadership styles. And I spent about 15 years in a variety of roles. I did controllership, I did planning, I did internal audit, all through. And one of the overriding principles that I had while doing these roles was, how can I develop my successor? Okay, so none of the jobs that I left did the company have to go outside and look for a leader. And I take great pride in that, because it doesn't happen automatically. You have to invest in developing people and developing leaders as you move along. The second thing I did was really try to understand the business and see how I can make a difference. I mean, I'm not talking about governance. I'm not talking about the accounting, the reporting, etc. It's how do I make a difference to the business, a positive difference. Okay, so that continued. So I left Carrier and then moved on to a food business, which is again, Yum Brands, a world leader in food retailing and QSR. Spent some time there, and then I
What is
moved
QSR? What is QSR?
quick service restaurant. So
Okay.
the KFCs, the Pizza Huts, the
Yes.
McDonald's. And then I went out of my comfort zone and moved into agri. And believe me, I had not even seen a seed in my life, and that was again a really life-changing experience. Learning about agriculture, what problems farmers face in Asia, how do they overcome that? How again, as a finance person, can I sort of make a difference to farming? So significant learning. So some common themes emerged. I talked about developing leaders. I talked about business partnering. I talked about agility. Okay, so moving from industries also requires you to flex your muscles. It really tests your mental agility and your adaptability to work in different industries where the dynamics are very different.
Give me an example of that.
Farmers typically in Asia don't have access to finance, and that's a big problem because they need to borrow money at ridiculous rates of interest. You're talking of 20% a year, 30% a year, 40% sometimes, depending on how greedy the money lender is. So, as a finance person, what I did for one of the countries that I had oversight on was, um, these farmers were so poor that they couldn't afford to buy their own seed. So we got a bank in, okay, and we told the bank that you got to fulfill your priority sector lending targets. So here is farming for you, and you have to finance the farmer, and the farmer after he grows the grain can sell it to a grain producer. Again, we brought them into onto the platform, like let's say a Cargill or a Bunge or a ADM. Okay, so these are large grain collectors. So they would buy from the farmer and pay the bank. We established a closed loop cycle, right? Farmer getting financing from a bank, he gets the money to plant the seed. The seed grows into grain. Cargill comes in and buys the grain, and the money goes to the farmer and to the bank. So it's I mean, when scaled up, it works seamlessly without any problem. And that was a pilot, of course, and I was very proud of that because you really are solving a real life problem.
So,
Okay.
when you were doing
Yeah.
so well, why did you want to quit it and start to become an entrepreneur?
Good question. So I guess disillusionment creeps in, and it happens when when things are going really well. You don't think about it. You are disillusioned and you question a lot of things that corporates do, but you really don't think about it much because life is good. You get your paychecks, bonuses, ESOPs, and life is good, right? So you don't think about it. But I think when there's a pivot, I would call it pivot. I wouldn't call it a shock. The company I used to work in, Monsanto, got acquired. Okay, and then you know what happens, right? Roles get you get into this merry-go-round, musical chairs, whatever you call it. Your roles get totally redefined and all that, and then you start thinking, is this what I want to be? If I want to leave a legacy, and when I'm, let's say, 70 years old and at the end of my career, do I want to really live a life like this? And that sets you thinking. It's not easy. For example, you got to forget a lot of things that you take for granted when you're working. Okay, I can say a few things. Your paycheck on the 28th, that doesn't come anymore. The other big thing that you don't realize is you work for a big brand, and that brand goes away suddenly. So you got to start from ground zero developing your own brand, and you don't have power of a big brand supporting you in whatever you do. I think that is the biggest realization and the biggest change that any leader has to be prepared for.
So, who needs to, who benefits most from a strong personal brand? Is it somebody early in their career, or is it somebody who is an experienced leader who needs to have a strong personal brand, or both, or neither? What?
I think it can happen at both stages. I mean, if you have the grit and the capability, and you can afford to be, because affordability plays a big role. We are not born with a lot of wealth, right? And we have obligations, children's education, building up your own nest egg, etc. It can happen at any stage. I'm not suggesting it has to happen. For me, I think I was risk averse. Being a finance person, you automatically are risk averse in the beginning, right? I mean, and if things are going well, especially you're growing, you're seeing different things, working in different countries, you're gaining, you're learning new things every day. It's not easy, right? So I guess for me, it happened pretty late after spending 22 years in the corporate world. But you can become an entrepreneur after spending 3, 4 years, 5 years. There's no fixed timeline, in my opinion.
When you started the search business, why did you choose the search business? What was specific about search that drew you to it? And
When I was in the corporate world in Singapore, working in a regional role, I had about 70, 80 people reporting into me region wide. I was amazed that one person, let's say even middle level, okay, but a critical person in the organization leaves. It took us 4 to 5 months to get a replacement. And we used a variety of talent acquisition techniques. Okay, we use search firms, we referrals, job boards, LinkedIn, you name it. Okay, everything. But still, the cycle was 4 months. In fact, we used to celebrate when we hired somebody in 3 months. Okay, with a party in the pantry. And that set me thinking that why is it so complex? And one day I sat down and calculated the cost of not hiring on time, and the numbers were mind-boggling. We don't see it, but there is a cost. Okay, and then I used to wonder, why hasn't anyone cracked this conundrum? For the simple reason, there are about 350 licensed search firms in Singapore run by very experienced people who I believe know their job very well. Again, while I was running my agribusiness consulting, which is what I did after I left the corporate world, this problem used to come up. Okay, oh, I don't have this person, and that's why I can't grow. We have a great CEO, but what happens when he leaves? Okay, so, and I would just, recommend some names and all that. And then one fine morning, it struck me that maybe, this is something I should do for a living some stage. Even then, I was not fully convinced. And then an European executive search firm approached me to set up their Singapore office. And I said, okay, I'll do it part-time. I'm not very confident that I can do it full-time. I'll do it part-time and see if I'm happy doing it. And I was incredibly happy. I spent 50% of my time at the end of 1 year, had got 5, 6 clients who believed in me, who really liked my approach. And then again, at the end of 1 year, the thing is, why am I working for someone else and not starting on my own? And that led to the birth of Invictus Search in Singapore.
fantastic story. I want to sort of take you back to the early days when you joined you started becoming a search firm, and as you started meeting people. What was the thing about the search business that really surprised you? You didn't ever imagine it to be like that. What was that?
The company that gave out the mandate really didn't have a good idea what they wanted. Okay, so they had a job description, of course, but you had to really go deep in and talk to not only HR or talent acquisition, but the hiring manager, maybe sometimes even the regional CEO, if the position is a very critical and senior role, to understand what exactly they want. Because I found out that in 70 to 80% of the cases, they were not able to articulate that very clearly. And to me, as a recruiter, you will be successful only when you understand exactly what the client wants and you deliver on that. So to me, that was the biggest surprise, that how can a HR person or a business leader in a Fortune 200 not know exactly what they want and what will click.
Let me switch to the candidate side. When you think about candidates when they are looking for a role,
Right.
how do you identify? Is it true that passive candidates are harder to wean away from their job? And how do you know that somebody is a passive candidate and somebody is an active candidate?
Okay, so now with digital media, it's very easy, right? You have these badges open to A lot of people don't put those badges. So I think being in the industry, so we specialize in certain industries. So I specialize in food, I specialize in agri. We've just moved into FMCG and industrials. And of course, in the CFO space across all industries. Okay. And again, our role is not to get the keenest candidate for the role. Our focus is to get the right candidate for the role. So whether that's a passive candidate or an active candidate really doesn't matter. For a passive candidate, I think you got to present the role. You're almost like a marketer there, right? You have to sell the role to the passive candidate. And once you do that, they become active. If you're not able to sell the role and sort of focus on exactly the pain points or the challenges, if I may say, that the role entails, which excite the candidate, you will not make him or her an active candidate.
What are some common mistakes that people make, at the senior level in the job search?
So I still believe that leaders, the best way to get another job is to network. You really get the best leads from your own personal network, and people don't have enough time to do that when they are in demanding leadership roles. I didn't get the time. Okay. And now I think I'm making up for lost time because the name of the game is networking, meeting new people, gelling with them, and sort of, being active, very socially active. So that's one mistake. The second mistake, and this is irrespective of seniority, I find that when people sign up for being presented for a role, they don't research the company and the role well. Okay, and that's an immediate red flag, and an interviewer can pick up very quickly that this person is really not interested. They've not really researched our brand or the role or the company. And it doesn't take a long time, and this is a very common mistake I see. I would say that candidates get rejected because they haven't researched the role very well.
What kind of information should they be looking at and compiling?
The most important, I think, is they need to research what is the company culture and whether that resonates with them, because you don't want a square peg in a round hole. Right now we do a lot of that. I think that is one, and it's a little bit more difficult because, again, on company web pages, the culture that they say is very different from the culture that is operating on the ground. So again, you got to probably talk to some ex-employees or current employees and find out, hey, what is the true culture, right? So I think that is one. I think second one is purpose. I mean, I think the purpose of the company has to resonate with you. I'm being very open here. Somebody who is very concerned about health and nutrition is not going to enjoy working for a fast food company. Okay, because inherently it's there to satisfy a craving and is not very healthy. So there are a number of dimensions. I think the top two I mentioned, that somebody has to really understand before they go for the interview.
Is it true that at the junior level, people fail because they don't fit the role very well, whereas at the senior level, people fail because they don't fit the culture very well? Is that a reasonable conclusion?
It's a matter of degree. Okay, at a junior level, when you're, let's say, a manager or a junior manager, whatever you call it, or an analyst, I think the focus is more on your technical skills, okay, or your functional skills. The leadership comes in at a senior level, as you know, right, where I think everybody takes it for granted that you're functionally or technically very competent and proficient. So yes, but I think culture fit even at the very junior level is very important, because if there's no culture fit, I don't think the person will be very happy in their job, and will not be able to perform. So it has a linkage. But you're right, the significance goes up as you grow into more senior roles.
When you are looking at evaluating leadership potential, um, how do you assess that, and how do you assess the opportunity for the person to grow in that role? And the reason why I ask that is sometimes people are the search mandate is that you have to find a person who is now taking this particular role but will eventually take a much bigger role. So
Mhm.
how do you assess for that potential difference?
Every company is different, so your assessment has to be very different, whether you're doing a search for a Fortune 500 company or a family run conglomerate in an Asian country, right? The parameters or the leadership traits that would define success are very different in these two cases. Some of the common things that we look are, for example, agility. Okay, has this person been successful at different roles in different environments, and how they have steered the organization, the function in these difficult circumstances. So agility, to our mind, is topmost, and it cuts across, I guess, company cultures, and so that's one. I think the second one is their ability to develop leaders. Okay, because at the end of the day, this person may be super brilliant, but if he or she doesn't have an inspirational style of leadership that automatically gives birth to different leaders in the organization, and that those leaders can be at mid-level, junior level, doesn't matter. So it is like a viral thing that goes around. Okay, that person doesn't have that charisma and that emotional intelligence to do that. I think it so top two, I would say, to our mind, these come. And then there are a host of others. Empathy, we look at their ability to listen. We look at their ability to craft strategy. All those are there. But if you ask my top two, it would be agility and the ability to develop leaders at all levels in the organization.
If you contrast this with, let's say, somebody who's trying to run their own business, in that particular case, what do you look for? If somebody were to say that, I don't know, I think I could do a good job as an entrepreneur, what are some of the questions now in retrospect you would ask before you take the plunge and become an entrepreneur?
Topmost thing is, okay, is there a need in the market for what you want to do? So if you're meeting an unmet need, I think the chances of success are very high, provided you do the right things. So I'll give you an example. When I was toying with this idea of starting my own search firm, I was already in a search firm at that time. I spoke to different people, and 9 out of 10 said that it's not going to work because there are 350 people, 350 search firms being run by very solid people, in whether in HR, they're like really HR gurus and all, and you're like no one. So that was that. The only person who believed in me was my wife, and she said that, you know what, there may be, but how many of these are really meeting these unmet needs of getting the right person in the fastest possible time? The tagline is very simple: we get you the right leaders in the fastest possible time. Okay, and for companies, there is a tremendous value to this. So if you're meeting an unmet need, that's fine. Second, after you start, if there is one thing that everyone has to remember, is it's customer centricity. You have to think that the customer is always right, and sometimes you get very irritated, okay, because customers have unrealistic expectations, but find a way to work around that. And I think that immediately gives you a lot of business, a lot of referrals, and you end up being happy, and the customer remains happy.
When you think about somebody wanting to change their career, you've done something which is rare. I mean, you've gone from being in finance, a very successful CFO, to running a very successful search firm. It's a completely unrelated area, different function.
Right.
What do you advise? I mean, when you're trying to change your career, should you be doing something halfway through which is similar, it's an overlap, or is it worth taking the plunge and just doing something which you are really set on doing? Are you better off doing it at one shot? So should you rip off the bandage, or should you just slowly, cautiously feel your way through and then pivot?
A risk averse person, right? I mean, I'm changing as we speak, but I would do my homework, right? Because, and I think that the more people you talk to, if you have a coach, if you have a mentor, if you have somebody you trust, talk to those people to see what you are thinking of. Does it really make sense? Because even if it makes sense, you will find that there are ways you can modify the offering, you can pivot a little bit, you can have a little bit different go to market approach. Okay, so talking to others is, I think, very, very important. After that, I think if you strongly believe in it, and you have to really strongly believe in it, okay, because at the end of the day, you don't have a brand, you're building it, right? So one of the key things is you believe in yourself, then you can build something, because you are going to build it. Once these two are set, go for it. I don't think you should go halfway or anything. Go for it. If you feel that certain amount of capital needs to be invested, get that capital and invest it. It is a part and parcel of our life that we will make mistakes, we will learn from that. We should have that, what would you call, tenacity to get up from that and go.
When you think about the safety net that you need to have, what would be your advice? I mean, is it like, a couple of months, couple of years? Where did you kind of, now when you look back, what would be your advice?
Okay, another great question. I think that having a safety net is very important. In fact, that is what prevents us from starting much earlier on in our careers. Okay. So depending on the stage, I think I would choose a minimum of a year's worth of expenses. You should not have to worry, because it takes time to build something from scratch.
When I was planning to do something similar, go solo, somebody advised me that, among some of the Gujarati families, there is a saying that no business actually comes into fruition in the true sense unless you've spent 1,000 days, which is roughly a little more than 3 years, working on it, sharpening it, and all of that. So the advice that I was given was that you should, while you have the job, spend 12 to 18 months. That's if that's the time that you are giving yourself, whatever is the time you think that I should make it work in 12 months or 3 years or 2 years or 6 months, whatever be that time frame. While you have the job, spend that time frame living in the bare minimum, and see that if you really worked like that and you didn't make anything, what is that lifestyle you would have, and is that acceptable to you? And then that's another way in which you can suss out what's the right time. Do you need to save more? Can you take the plunge today, or you feel that you are such a risk taker that you will be able to do it? So that's my two penny bit. But thank you so much, Anupam. Absolutely awesome talking to you, and so inspiring that somebody can go from being a CFO all the way to being a very successful search firm. And all the best for your career. Thank you so much.